Age.
Thank you. Well, the Green Party continues to, because, as Holly Walker explained, we don't believe it will increase the supply of affordable housing, and also because it represents another erosion of local government and local democracy by this national government. And, Mr Naro, democracy is a fairly important detail. And it does this because it's overriding the decision-making powers of city and district councils in terms of urban planning, and it's curtailing public participation rights under the Resource Management Act. And it's certainly not about a partnership between central and local government. It's much more about a centralisation of power, more power to the minister. And, Mr Speaker, it's going to have quite bad implications for urban planning because it cuts across the work that councils have done to identify areas for growth, to set urban limits in place, to prohibit residential development beyond those, to make sure that our cities and towns promote compact, well-planned residential development, to make sure that we get new residential development so that it's integrated with existing infrastructure like public transport services, major roads, water supply and sewerage. But this government hates planning. It hates to look beyond the short term to consider the needs of future generations for well-planned cities and towns. It's all about letting the market prevail with as light a regulatory hand as possible. And, Mr Speaker, this bill is a charter for property developers and for urban sprawl because it's giving the minister and property developers a free hand to challenge and cut across urban limits and well-planned development. And it does this through the strong-arm provisions which allow the minister to designate these special housing areas where we'll get much more permissive resource consent processes and a much greater fast-tracking of those processes, regardless of whether or not the council agrees to that. And there's no requirement for the minister to consult the affected local authorities. And because if you don't have an accord negotiated with the relevant council, you get the Chief Executive of the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment becoming the decision-maker on resource consents for residential development. The council is effectively strong-armed into agreeing to a so-called accord. So, as the Local Government New Zealand noted in its submission, where you get the minister swooping in and where you get these ad hoc decisions about where residential development is to occur that's not in line with existing council plans or existing council priorities for infrastructure development, then you're going to get very fragmented decisions. And it's really ironic that the minister for this bill, who in a previous role as Minister of Local Government was repeatedly beating up on local councils for their rates increases, is now promoting legislation which, through poorly planned residential development being encouraged, which doesn't integrate with infrastructure, will potentially increase the costs on councils if they have to provide, for example, new wastewater infrastructure, new water supply infrastructure, which they weren't planning to provide in response to the new development in these special housing areas. So that potentially increases rating costs and potentially, as Local Government New Zealand noted, affects the creditworthiness of councils. The bill is also anti-democratic because it completely overrides, through these special housing areas, the investment which councils and their communities have put into developing their plans. And it's those plans which reflect our community aspirations. Yet the plans are given very little weight in the decision-making process, the fast-track decision-making process for new residential development that the bill allows. And again, one hand of government doesn't seem to know what the other is doing, because councils will limit areas where residential development can occur, not just to set urban limits and encourage compact cities, but also to ensure that development doesn't happen in areas at risk of natural hazards, like areas that are flood-prone. So we've got the minister encouraging development here which doesn't take account of plan provisions, yet his colleague, the Minister for the Environment, proposing to strengthen the natural hazard provisions in the RMA. And as submitters on the bill noted, the rush to reform means that we potentially get overlapping provisions.
Mike Sabin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pleased to take the last